What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks straight into a storm he never expected, on live television? What happens when a man known for calm wisdom, discipline, and iron composure suddenly finds himself clashing, publicly, intensely, and explosively, with a host who never backs down? And what happens when the audience witnesses a moment so heated that even the producers freeze, unsure of whether to cut to commercial, or let the world watch it burn? The lights inside the studio of The View burned bright, casting that familiar warm glow across the famous semicircle table. The crowd murmured with a mix of excitement and reverence. Today wasn't just any show. Today, they had him, Denzel Washington. A name that carried weight. A presence that could silence a room. A legend whose reputation for discipline and dignity made him one of the most admired figures in Hollywood. Everyone expected a thoughtful, inspiring interview. The kind Denzel was known for. No one expected a confrontation. Not the audience. Not the producers. And certainly not Joy Behar, whose comedic timing and sharp tongue had sharpened over decades in entertainment. But clashes don't wait for permission, and sometimes tension sparks in the most unlikely seconds. It started innocently enough. Denzel had just finished talking about the importance of grounded discipline in Hollywood, about choosing roles that reflect integrity and purpose. His voice was calm, steady, the same kind of voice that defined entire generations of moviegoers. The audience nodded along, hanging on every word. Joy leaned forward, arms crossed, wearing that half-smile that signaled she was about to challenge something. The crowd recognized that look. Producers recognized it too. A camera operator subtly adjusted angle, just in case. "So, Denzel," Joy said, her tone light but edged. "You always talk about accountability, personal responsibility, all that. But don't you think celebrities like you are a bit out of touch? You come here with all these discipline lessons, but the world isn't exactly a movie set." A few members of the audience chuckled nervously. That wasn't just a disagreement. That was a jab. And a sharp one. Denzel blinked slowly, tilting his head. Not offended, but calculating. "You think I'm out of touch?" he asked, his voice low yet controlled. "Joy, I've lived a lot of life before Hollywood. I come from reality. I don't speak from a bubble." Joy waved her hand dismissively. Sure. But when someone as successful as you starts preaching about responsibility, people at home might think you're lecturing them. They don't have movie star privilege." The air tightened. Even Sunny Hostin shifted slightly in her seat, her eyebrows rising as if warning Joy to pace herself. Whoopi leaned back, hands clasped, watching carefully like she sensed where this was heading. But Joy didn't stop. She leaned in closer. "People are struggling, Denzel. You telling them to work harder or stay disciplined doesn't fix anything. It's a little patronizing." A soft gasp moved through the audience. Denzel's jaw clenched, not in anger, but in conviction. The kind that came from years of real experience. "Hold on," he said quietly. "I never said people just need to work harder. You're putting words in my mouth." Joy shrugged. "That's how it comes across." The crowd grew restless. One camera zoomed in on Denzel's face. He didn't look defensive. He looked disappointed. The kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than anger. "Joy," he said, his tone calmer than before but with a rising undercurrent. "If I talk about discipline, it's because it saved my life. Not my career, my life. My upbringing wasn't glamorous. I don't say these things to preach. I say them because I know what losing control can do to someone." Applause rippled across the studio. A few people even cheered. Joy nodded slowly, but her eyes sharpened, sensing the shift in audience favor. "Well," she said, "everyone comes from something. Doesn't mean they all get to your level." That struck deeper than she intended. And everyone knew it. Denzel's eyes narrowed just slightly, not in hostility, but in something far heavier. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. "You're right," he said. "Most people won't reach my level. But that doesn't mean they can't rise in their own lives. And if someone like me doesn't speak on discipline, then who should? Someone who's failed at it." The audience burst into cheers. Some clapped loudly. Others shook their heads like they knew Joy had pushed too far. Joy stiffened, forcing a laugh. "Oh, come on, Denzel. Don't get dramatic. You actors always take things so seriously." That line, "you actors," hit a nerve. Whoopi interjected gently. "Joy, maybe let him finish." But Joy didn't stop. "No, I'm serious. Every time a celebrity comes on, we get another monologue about life and discipline like they've got everything figured out. How about being real? How about admitting you don't know everything? The audience fell silent. Denzel leaned back, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it looked like he wouldn't respond. The tension stretched, thick and electric. Then he spoke quietly, too quietly. You want me to be real? Joy crossed her arms. Yes. Denzel nodded slowly, exhaling. Okay, here's real. The room leaned in. I don't have everything figured out. I struggle, just like anyone. I've made mistakes. I've failed. I've battled with myself. You want honesty? There were years when I didn't think I'd make it, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I'm not here to preach from a pedestal. I'm here because people are hurting. And discipline, purpose, faith, those things helped me survive. A hush fell over the studio. His words weren't loud, but they carried weight, raw, human, vulnerable. But Joy wasn't done. Then why does it always sound like you're above everyone? Huh, she said, leaning in aggressively. Why does it come off like you're lecturing when people are drowning out there? That was the moment something switched in Denzel. Not anger. Hurt. Real hurt. He straightened in his seat, the muscles in his shoulders tightening. His voice deepened, taking on that commanding resonance audiences knew from his most powerful roles. But this wasn't acting. Joy, I don't talk down to people. But I won't water down the truth because it makes someone uncomfortable. If the world is drowning, we don't help by saying it's okay to drown. We help by throwing a rope. Discipline is a rope. Purpose is a rope. I'm trying to help, whether you like how it sounds or not. The audience erupted again, this time louder, more emotional. Joy's jaw tightened. She wasn't used to someone pushing back with this level of intensity. You say that, she said, but you don't live the life of the average person. Denzel didn't hesitate. Neither do you, Joy. And yet here you are debating life struggles with me. That landed like a hammer. Gasps. Murmurs. A few shouts. Even Whoopi's eyes widened. Joy looked stunned, caught completely off guard. And for the first time in the entire exchange, she didn't have an immediate comeback. The silence stretched long enough that even the producers hesitated. But the moment wasn't over. Joy forced a smile. Tight, thin, defensive. So what are we supposed to do, Denzel? She said finally. Take your word as gospel. Denzel shook his head. No, but you could respect that my perspective comes from somewhere real. Just because I'm an actor doesn't mean my experience is invalid. Joy let out a short, sharp laugh. Oh, it's real, huh? Sonny looked at her sharply. Joy. But Joy continued. Come on. People don't need some dramatic sermon from an actor. Denzel froze. Something inside him changed. The audience felt it instantly. A shift, a drop, a gathering storm. He spoke softly, but each word carried force. You can mock my work. You can challenge my ideas. But you don't get to belittle my life. The audience gasped. Joy stopped smiling. Denzel leaned forward, his voice a low thunder. You don't know the nights I spent wondering if I'd see another day. You don't know the struggles my family went through. You don't know what discipline means to someone trying to survive. So don't you dare call it a sermon. Don't you dare minimize the things that kept me alive. Dead silence. Then, applause. Roaring applause. Some audience members stood. Joy tried to speak, but her voice faltered. For the first time all morning, she looked shaken. Denzel sat back, breathing deeply, eyes steady but burning with something he rarely showed publicly, pain. The cameras zoomed in. The hosts exchanged glances. The tension didn't fade. It only thickened. Because everyone in that room knew. This confrontation was only beginning. Denzel remained still for several seconds, letting the applause roll through the studio like a rising tide. But the energy wasn't celebratory. It was charged, tense, electric. Something inside the atmosphere had shifted, and everyone knew it. Even the air felt thicker. Even the camera operators began to move with more caution, as though afraid any sudden motion might ignite the situation further. Whoopi cleared her throat lightly. It was her subtle signal, the one the audience at home might not notice, but the hosts did. It was the let's breathe signal, the attempt to cool the rising heat. But before she could speak, Joy leaned in again, refusing to let the silence settle. So you're saying I'm minimizing your life? She asked, her voice softer, but still edged with defensiveness. It wasn't her usual sarcastic tone. It was something else, something wounded but combative. Denzel looked at her with a steady, almost sorrowful calm. I'm saying you don't get to judge what shaped me. Just like I don't get to judge what shaped you. There was sincerity in his tone, a quiet dignity that almost softened the room. Almost. But tempers don't settle that easily. Not when pride is involved. Not when millions are watching. Not when a moment has already grown too big to shrink. Joy straightened. I'm not judging your life, Denzel. I'm questioning the messaging. Because when public figures, especially ones with your level of influence, start talking about discipline, it can feel like blame. Denzel nodded slowly. I hear that. But intent matters. Connection matters. And telling people they're capable of rising, capable of pushing forward, that's not blame. That's belief. A few members of the audience murmured in agreement. But then Joy's tone sharpened, just enough to tilt the balance again. And you think people aren't aware of their own struggle? You think telling them to rise isn't just another cliché? A small flicker appeared in Denzel's eyes, something between frustration and disbelief. Joy, he said, you're twisting my words into something they are not. She leaned back, crossing her arms again. I'm asking you to be clearer. Sonny interjected gently. Maybe what Joy is saying. But Denzel held up a hand, not rudely, just firmly. No. Let her finish. The room tensed again. Joy raised her eyebrows, caught off guard by the invitation. Okay, she said. Here's what I think. I think celebrities come on this show and give these motivational speeches because they want to look wise, or grounded, or relatable. But they are not living the same reality as the people they are talking to. And whether you mean it or not, it sounds like preaching. That word, preaching, hung in the air like smoke. Denzel inhaled slowly. You think I'm here to look wise? Joy shrugged. I think everyone who sits at that table wants to look wise. Denzel let out a small, humorless laugh. Joy, I don't need to look wise. I don't need to impress anyone. I've lived enough life to know that fame doesn't make you immune to struggle. In fact, sometimes it makes struggle worse. The audience reacted softly, murmurs, nods. But, Denzel continued, I share what helped me because people are hurting. You may call it a sermon. I call it truth. Joy shook her head. Truth from your perspective. Exactly, Denzel replied instantly. From my perspective. And isn't that why you invited me here? To share it. That struck harder than expected. Joy didn't speak right away. The tension hung suspended in the space between them, pulling everyone into its gravity. Whoopi broke the silence. Maybe we should. But once again, the moment wouldn't let itself be contained. Joy exhaled sharply, sounding almost exasperated. Look, fine. You have your truth. I get that. But when someone with your influence talks about discipline, it feels like you're suggesting people just aren't trying hard enough. Denzel leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on hers in a steady, unflinching gaze. I never said people aren't trying. I'm saying they deserve to know they are stronger than their circumstances. Joy shook her head vigorously. But that's not always true. That sentence struck Denzel like a blow. Not physically. Emotionally. Something in his expression shifted, a subtle tightening around the eyes, a deeper seriousness taking over. Not always true, he repeated quietly. You don't believe people can rise. You don't believe someone struggling can find strength inside themselves. Joy didn't blink. Not everyone can. The audience gasped. Sonny covered her mouth in disbelief. Sarah Haynes leaned forward, eyes wide. Even Whoopi looked stunned. Denzel didn't speak for several seconds. His breathing deepened, but his voice stayed controlled, almost too controlled. That, he said softly, is the saddest thing I've ever heard someone say on this show. Joy's face reddened, a mix of anger and embarrassment flaring. It's not sad. It's realistic. No, Denzel replied. It's defeat. And you're spreading it. The audience erupted again, this time divided. Half clapped. Half murmured uncomfortable sounds. Joy threw up her hands. I'm spreading defeat? Come on, Denzel. He didn't flinch. Yes, because if you believe people can't rise, you're telling them not to try. Joy laughed sharply, too sharply. That's ridiculous. Is it? Denzel asked. Because millions of people watch this show. They look to you all for perspective. And if you tell them strength doesn't matter, discipline doesn't matter, resilience doesn't matter, then what are you giving them? Comfort? Or excuses? Joy snapped. Don't you dare imply I'm giving people excuses. Denzel replied instantly, firmly. Then stop acting like they are powerless. The words detonated between them. Joy's eyes widened, then narrowed. I'm acknowledging reality. And I'm acknowledging possibility, Denzel said. But possibility isn't guaranteed. Joy shot back. Neither is survival, Denzel countered. But people still fight. That sentence shook the studio. It was raw, human, and undeniably true. Joy leaned forward so far that her hands pressed flat against the table. And what about people who fight and still fail? She demanded. Denzel didn't back down. Then we help them fight again. Joy threw up her hands. Not everyone has the support you had. Denzel's voice rose, not in anger, but in passion. You think I had support? You think I had resources? Joy, I came from nothing. I made mistakes. I fell. Hard. There were people who counted me out before I even had a chance. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Because if I did, I'd be dead. The audience froze. You could hear pins drop. Joy's eyes widened slightly, thrown by the gravity of his admission. Denzel continued, voice quieter now but more intense than ever. You don't know what it's like to feel the world trying to pull you under. To feel like every bad choice, every bad influence, every step off the path is trying to destroy you. I didn't talk about discipline today to preach. I talked about it because without it, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair. I'd be gone. The studio fell into a profound silence. No one moved. Not even Joy. Denzel sat back slowly. His chest rose and fell deeply, as though he'd revealed something he hadn't planned to share. Joy swallowed hard. Her eyes softened, just for a moment. But pride is a powerful force. And she looked away before the vulnerability could settle. So what, then? She said, voice quieter but still defensive. You think I don't care about people? You think I don't want them to succeed? Denzel shook his head. I think you underestimate them. Joy bristled again. No, I don't. Yes, Denzel said. You do. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't speak like rising is impossible. Joy stared at him. For the first time, she didn't seem to know what to say. The audience watched, breathless, waiting for something, resolution, explosion, anything. Sunny finally spoke, her voice low with emotion. Maybe there's truth on both sides. Joy is acknowledging hardship. Denzel is highlighting resilience. Denzel nodded at Sunny. Hardship is real. But so is strength. Joy folded her arms again but didn't argue. Sarah added, people need both. Compassion and encouragement. Denzel nodded. Exactly. Joy took a breath, ready to speak, maybe to soften, maybe to push again. But before a single word left her mouth, an audience member shouted, Let him finish, Joy. The entire room gasped. Producers froze. Joy turned sharply toward the crowd. Excuse me. But another voice called out. He's telling the truth. Denzel raised a hand toward the audience. Please, don't do that. She's allowed to challenge me. Joy looked surprised by the courtesy. Denzel turned back to her. We're having a real conversation. A hard one. But a real one. Joy looked at him, irritation and something else, something more emotional, blending in her expression. You really believe people can rise no matter what? She asked quietly. Denzel held her gaze. I believe they have to try. And I believe we owe them hope, not limits. Joy didn't answer. But her eyes flickered, like something inside her was shifting, even if she wouldn't admit it. The room stayed silent, heavy with unspoken emotions. And then, the director's frantic voice crackled through the overhead speaker. Take a break. Cut to commercial. Cut. But the cameras were still rolling. The hosts were still seated. The tension hadn't even begun to settle. And when the commercial didn't cut fast enough, the moment spiraled into something no one in the building could predict. The red light on the main studio camera flickered instead of shutting off. For a split second, the entire room froze, not knowing whether they were still live or seconds from cutting to commercial. Even the audience didn't know if they were supposed to clap, sit tight, or hold their breath. The air was thick enough to feel, buzzing with nerves, emotion, and something no one expected from a daytime talk show, danger. Joy shifted in her seat, her fingers tapping restlessly against the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, tense, and trembling with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. So this is where we are now. The audience shouting at me, she muttered, shaking her head. Denzel's eyes softened. Joy, what happened just now wasn't about you. It was about the moment. Joy let out a short, sharp laugh. Oh please. Everything ends up about me. I'm the villain the second someone disagrees with a beloved Hollywood legend. Denzel leaned forward. You're not a villain. You're just pushing. And sometimes pushing makes things break open. Joy raised an eyebrow. Break open. Or break apart. Whoopi exhaled heavily, rubbing her forehead. We really need that commercial. But the commercial still hadn't kicked in. The director's voice came through again, more panicked. We're trying. Just keep talking casually. But nothing about this moment was casual. The cameras kept rolling. The audience sat frozen. And the tension between Denzel and Joy hung like a wire stretched too tight. Sonny leaned in, whispering, maybe this is a moment we can turn into something productive. Sawa nodded hesitantly. You both have strong perspectives. People at home experience both sides, struggling to survive and wanting encouragement to keep going. Joy sighed, but there was a flicker of vulnerability beneath the irritation. I get that, Sawa. I do. But sometimes encouragement isn't enough. Sometimes people need help that discipline alone doesn't fix. Denzel nodded slowly. You're right. Support matters. Resources matter. Community matters. Joy blinked, surprised he agreed. But, Denzel continued, his voice steady, without discipline, none of those things stick. You can give someone a ladder, but if they don't climb, they'll stay where they are. Joy's jaw tightened again. And what if someone physically can't climb? What if they are burned out, exhausted, unsupported, traumatized? Denzel didn't interrupt. He listened. Joy continued, her voice rising, shaky but emotional. What if they already tried 100 times and fell every single time? Are you saying they just weren't disciplined enough? Denzel took a careful breath. No. I'm saying discipline means standing back up even when you're exhausted. Joy shook her head, near tears but refusing to crack. That's easy for you to say. Denzel held her gaze. No, it's not. A silence stretched, thick, heavy, almost painful. Joy swallowed. Then why does it feel like you're putting the burden on people who are already drowning? Denzel leaned in slowly, voice dropping into something deeper, more intimate. Because when I was drowning, no one else could make me swim. People tried. They helped. They pushed. But in the end, I had to fight for myself. I had to get uncomfortable. I had to face my own demons. No one could do that for me. Joy looked down, her eyes flickering with something. Hurt? Understanding? Conflict? She whispered. People are tired, Denzel. I know, he replied softly. So was I. Joy's head lifted slightly. Denzel continued, his tone shifting from defensive to vulnerable in a way that made the entire studio lean closer. There was a point in my life when I didn't think I deserved success. Or peace. I was angry. Lust. Making stupid decisions. Hanging around with the wrong people. I wasn't disciplined. I wasn't grateful. I wasn't even conscious of how close I was to destroying myself. Joy stared at him, stunned. The audience was silent. You could hear breathing, shifting, the subtle rustle of clothes, every tiny sound amplified by the quiet. For me, Denzel continued, discipline wasn't about controlling my time or work ethic. It was about controlling my emotions, controlling my impulses, learning to walk away from things that were killing me slowly. Joy's expression softened further, a visible, fragile shift. Denzel's voice grew even quieter. And I know people are tired. I know they are battling things no one else can see. But if I don't tell them they can rise, if I don't tell them there's something in them worth fighting for, then I'm lying. And I won't lie. Joy exhaled shakily. But what about compassion? What about not pushing people beyond what they can handle? Denzel nodded. Compassion is essential. But compassion without truth becomes pity. And pity doesn't lift people up, it keeps them down. The room murmured again, like the audience was realizing the emotional weight behind his words. But Joy wasn't done, not yet. She wiped her palms on her pants, gathering courage, and spoke again. Maybe part of my problem is that I've seen people who tried so hard and didn't get the ending they deserved. And I've seen people give everything they had and still collapse. Her voice cracked. Just barely. But enough to make the entire audience inhale sharply. Sonny looked at her with gentle concern. Joy. Joy swallowed the emotion and pushed forward, her voice raw. Maybe I push back on this idea of discipline because it hurts to see people blame themselves when life knocks them down over and over again. It hurts to see people think they failed because they weren't strong enough. And I don't want anyone thinking they are broken just because the world broke them first. Denzel stared at her, and for the first time since the confrontation began, something like empathy washed over his expression. Quiet empathy. Real empathy. He leaned closer, voice low. Joy, that's not weakness. That's love. Joy looked startled. And he continued. And I understand what you're saying. Truly. People aren't broken because they fail. They are not weak because they struggle. They are not lesser because they fall apart sometimes. Joy's eyes glistened. She blinked fast, refusing to let tears spill. But, Denzel said softly, if you tell them they can't rise, then you're giving up on them. Joy's lip trembled. I'm not giving up on them. Then don't limit them, he said gently. Joy opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her breath shuddered. And in that moment, the cameras, still rolling, captured something rare, an unmasked, unfiltered glimpse of her humanity. The audience wasn't clapping now. They were watching with reverence, sensing something almost sacred in the air. Sarah spoke softly. Maybe this is the heart of the issue. Joy wants people to feel seen. Denzel wants them to feel capable. Sonny added, both matter. Whoopi nodded. Both do. Joy finally found her voice, barely above a whisper. I don't want people to think I don't believe in them. Denzel shook his head gently. I don't think that. I think you're trying to protect them. Joy looked away, hiding a flicker of emotion. Maybe that's it. Denzel softened. But protecting people doesn't mean telling them they can't stand. Joy took a breath. And encouraging them doesn't mean ignoring their pain. Exactly, Denzel said. The room exhaled as if releasing the tension it had been holding for too long. Sarah leaned forward, her tone hopeful. So maybe both of you aren't as far apart as it seemed. Joy let out a small, shaky laugh. Maybe we just communicate differently. Denzel smiled faintly. That's an understatement. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, quiet, cautious, relieved. But the moment wasn't over. Not even close. Because while the tension between Denzel and Joy was easing, something else was building in the room. Something no one expected. The director's voice came through again, this time frantic. We are still live. Camera 2 is broadcasting. This is still airing. Whoopi's eyes widened. You're kidding. Denzel's jaw dropped slightly. So the whole conversation. Sonny whispered. It went out. Joy looked horrified. All of it. Sarah covered her mouth. Every second. The audience gasped, some murmuring, others sitting frozen. Joy felt her stomach drop, the blood draining from her face. Millions of people had just watched her break. Millions had witnessed the confrontation spiral past the script, past the format, past anything that daytime TV was supposed to contain. Her voice came out small. They saw everything. Denzel turned toward her, his expression unexpectedly soft. Yes, he said. They did. Joy looked at her hands, trembling slightly. And they are already reacting, Sonny whispered. Because phones were coming out. The audience was refreshing social feeds. Notifications were popping. People were typing. The internet was igniting. And the fallout was coming. Not tomorrow. Not in an hour. Right now. Live. The moment the cameras cut to commercial, the studio didn't breathe. It shivered. Whispering producers rushed in from every direction. Headsets buzzing. Eyes darting between Florence and Sonny as if waiting for one of them to ignite the room again. Florence didn't move. Her hands were still flat on the table, her chest rising and falling, jaw tight enough to crack. Sonny sat back in her chair, shoulders squared, refusing to blink first. The audience wasn't sure if they were allowed to talk, so the entire room existed in stunned, airless silence, the kind that makes even the walls feel tense. Joy Behar leaned in first, her voice low but sharp. Okay, what was that? Florence turned her head slowly, like she was fighting every instinct screaming at her to get up and walk off right then. That, she said, was me defending myself from something unnecessary. Sonny shot back instantly. Unnecessary would have been pretending I didn't hear what you implied. Florence's laugh was soft, too soft, the kind someone makes right before they break. I explained what I meant. You just didn't want to hear it. The floor manager called, back in 30, but no one reacted. The tension had built into something electric, almost dangerous, the kind of moment that makes a producer whisper to another, keep rolling in case something explodes. Sarah Haynes, voice trembling with the duty of a peacekeeper who knows she's stepping into fire, tried again. Guys, if we go back on air like this, people will notice. Sonny didn't look away from Florence. They already noticed. Florence's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with that tight, shimmering frustration that comes when someone feels betrayed on live television. Sonny, you know what's wild? she whispered. I came here to have a real conversation. I didn't expect to walk into a trap. Sunny's eyebrows lifted. A trap? Florence, disagreeing with you isn't a trap. It's a conversation. Then you don't call someone's feelings convenient. Sunny's lips parted. She hadn't expected Florence to repeat that word. Joy froze. Sarah froze. Even the audience, still murmuring under their breath, seemed to stop breathing again. Before Sunny could reply, the floor manager shouted, Back in 10. Florence stood. Everyone panicked for a split second. A celebrity standing up right before going back live is the kind of crisis that gives network executives migraines. Florence. Sarah reached for her arm. Florence didn't pull away, but she didn't sit either. She looked down at Sunny, her voice low enough that only the table could hear it. I'm not doing another 7 minutes of pretending everything's fine. Sunny held her gaze, unflinching. So walk out, if that's what you want. The words hit the table like a dropped glass. Florence inhaled sharply, and something in her shifted. Not anger. Not yet. But something cold and definitive, the kind of feeling that tells a person they've crossed a line they can't return from. Her voice cracked slightly when she spoke. You know what? Maybe I will. The studio doors suddenly felt impossibly far away. Every camera operator, every producer, every audience member leaned forward as if witnessing history. Joy muttered under her breath, Oh God, she's actually going. The stage manager counted down. 3, 2. Florence exhaled, slow, controlled, heartbreaking, and then she sat down. Not because she wanted to, but because the red light went live again. And as the show returned from commercial, the entire country saw Florence Pugh sitting rigidly in her chair, eyes forward, as if holding back the storm of her life. While Sunny Hostin lifted her cue card with a steady hand, preparing for round 2. Welcome back, Sunny said softly, but with a hidden sharpened edge. We were just getting started. Florence turned her head, and the look she gave Sunny could have cracked the studio floor.